with their families around that kitchen table. And it's very interesting what you learn. You know, if you ask Democrats, people on the left, they'll tell you that they're very concerned about the future of this country. They're worried about the kind of education their kids are going to get. What kind of an environment are we handing down? They're worried about a future with fewer and fewer good jobs. If you ask people on the right, they're also concerned about the future of the country. They're worried about mounting debts and deficits. They're worried about America's standing in the world now and in the future. They're also concerned about the type of country that we're handing down to our kids and our grandkids. People on both sides are worried about the future of this country. I have never met a voter who said to me, I don't care about the future, I just want what's best for me right now. I have never met that person. But that is exactly the way that the Republicans have chosen to govern. When we passed Social Security, they threatened to repeal it. When we passed Medicare, they threatened to repeal it. And now that we have passed health care reform, they are threatening to repeal it. Well, I have one message for Eric Cantor and John Boehner and to Rob Whitman. Let me say this clearly. I don't care what your buddies in the health insurance lobby want. We are not going backwards. Just think about this contrast. When President Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act into law, ending Jim Crow, he said, "We have lost the South for a generation," and he was right. Can you imagine today's Republican Party doing anything that would sacrifice their party's short-term political interests? Is there anything that they would be willing to lose an election over? You know, now that I think about it, actually there is one thing. There's one issue. Because when it comes to their friends on Wall Street, they do have a firm policy of no banker left behind. Our entire country is suffering because of this type of short-term thinking. And we've seen it all too clearly here in Virginia this year. We've seen it with Bob McDonnell and Ken Cuccinelli putting their conservative social agenda above the rights of our citizens and the needs of our families. We have seen it with Goldman Sachs designing investments meant to fail. We have seen the short-term thinking of banks who issued mortgages that they knew they would never be repaid. But they issued them because they knew they could sell those mortgages and earn a buck long before the consequences would ever be felt. We are living now in the future we failed to plan for. We're mired in wars in the Middle East because we failed to make the investments in energy independence in the 1970s that would have weaned us off of foreign oil. We are still paying that price. I am an unlikely person to stand here before you today. I'm the daughter of a teacher and a civil servant, the granddaughter of a coal miner, sheet metal worker or postal worker, and another teacher. And when I was growing up in King George County, I never saw myself running for Congress. When I was traveling the country working with the U.S. federal courts, helping them redesign their civil criminal accounting systems from Minneapolis to San Francisco to Roanoke, Virginia, I never saw myself running for Congress. And when my husband and I decided to strike out on our own, use our tech backgrounds to design educational software so that we could help kids learn, so that they wouldn't end up being trapped in that civil criminal accounting system, I never saw myself running for Congress. But nothing makes you think more about the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years than holding your own baby in your arms. On the day my daughter was born, I looked at her, so good, so sweet, so trusting, so full of life, that I asked myself, are we making the kinds of long-term decisions that are going to make our country a safe and prosperous place for my daughter to grow up in? Are we making the kinds of decisions that our founding fathers made when they sacrificed their lives and their sacred honor to defy the British and birth this country so that future generations could know what it was like to live in freedom? Are we making the same kinds of decisions that Democrat Ralph Yarborough made as the sole Southern senator to vote to end the filibuster and allow the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to pass? Are we making those kinds of decisions? So I decided right then and there that I had to stand up and fight, not just for my daughter Ella, but for the millions like her who deserve a world in which we are thinking about the long term and a future that is not poisoned by election results, poll results, and political gamesmanship. At that moment that I would run for Congress here in the 1st District of Virginia, where I was born and raised, where I was now raising my family. Because as long as we have politicians like Rob Whitman, nothing's going to change. You know, Rob Whitman, he's been our congressman for 3 years now. And in that 3 years, he's basically learned one thing, which is how to vote the way Eric Cantor tells him to. Very impressive. And it's even less impressive when you realize that the no button is bright red. He's voted no on equal pay for equal work, no on health care for poor children, no on basic consumer protections, and no on extending unemployment. And I really think he's going to regret that one in November. Politician. He is the kind of politician who talks about veterans and then votes against Senator Webb's 21st Century GI Bill. He is the type of politician who talks about the Bay and how important it is and how we have to clean it up, and then he turns around and votes against the Clean Estuaries Act. Rob Whitman takes his orders from credit card companies, health insurance companies, and banks. But you know what? Those guys already have enough members of Congress fighting for them. We need a fighter for the 1st District of Virginia. So this November, we have a clear choice. Voters have a clear choice. They can choose between tax cuts for the few and balancing the budget for everyone. Between preserving the middle class and preserving Wall Street executive bonuses. Between leaders who are willing to stand up for what's right and those who only stand for their own re-election. When Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act into law, he did say that we have lost the South for a generation. But I've got some bad news for Rob Whitman. I'm not from that generation. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your support, your commitment, your dedication, and your hard work at getting Democrats elected. And now, let's do this.